The cab door slammed shut with a thud that echoed down the narrow rain-soaked street, but Layla didn't hear it. She was already running, head down, soaked scarf clinging to her shoulders, her hospital discharge papers trembling in her hands as she pushed past in different crowds. It was just a few steps, she thought. Just a few steps into her sister's apartment building to grab her wallet from the mailbox, then back into the taxi. She was gone for maybe 30 seconds, 40 at most, but when she turned back around, heart already galloping with postpartum dread, the yellow cab was gone. At first, she didn't panic. Cabs leave all the time. Maybe he pulled around the corner? Maybe he didn't see her wave? But as she spun on the slick sidewalk, scanning every blur of yellow in the distance, a heavy coldness began to bloom in her chest. No, 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 she whispered, beginning to stumble into the street, waving at passing cars like a woman possessed. My baby's in there. Her voice cracked, then broke open into a scream that stabbed the air like a siren. She was 19. Alone. Just released from a public hospital after giving birth 2 weeks early. Her stitches were still raw, her arms bruised from 4 lines. And now, her newborn son, her only child, her everything was gone. Left sleeping in a navy blue carrier in the backseat of an anonymous New York City taxi. No one saw. No one noticed. She pounded on nearby windows. A shopkeeper came out to shoo her away. Lady, are you high? Calm down. Someone shouted from across the street. She ran into the traffic anyway, screaming at every cab that drove by. 4 hours. For what felt like her entire life. By the time the police showed up, she was shaking and nearly collapsed from dehydration. She tried to describe the cab, yellow. Maybe a pine tree air freshener. A scratch on the side. The driver? She couldn't remember. Middle-aged? Maybe with a beard? She wasn't sure. She'd been bleeding lightly through her jeans. She hadn't slept in 4 days. The baby had colic. She was just trying to breathe. That was the problem. No details. Nothing traceable. When the officer asked, "Why would you leave a baby in a cab?" Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Because she didn't. Because she meant to come right back. Because she was desperate and broke and hadn't held food in her stomach for days. But the truth doesn't matter when you're poor, brown-skinned, undocumented, and sobbing on the street in Queens. They called her unfit. Hysterical. Accused her of making the baby up. "Are you sure you even had a child, miss?" one detective asked, flipping through paperwork like it was fiction. "We don't see any discharge reports here. Maybe you lost the baby and this is grief talking." She tried to scream but her throat wouldn't let her. Her body failed her again. Layla spent the night in a psych observation ward. Then they let her go. Just like that. No child. No answers. Just silence. The hospital said there was a clerical mix-up with the birth certificate. Her name had never officially been filed due to her immigration status. No legal anchor. No footprint. No record of the baby being born. It was like he'd vanished not just from her arms, but from the earth itself. Her sister stopped answering her calls. Her aunt called it a curse. Her father, back in Damascus, told her never to return. And so Layla folded inward like a paper bird caught in rain, shrinking into silence, carrying only a blurry photograph of the child she had cradled for 12 days. She gave up her job at the laundromat. Gave up trying to explain. Gave up on therapy, on police reports, on God. She moved into a tiny basement room in a rundown building, worked as a cleaner in the night shifts, and stopped talking to the world. Her eyes grew hollow but alert, always searching, always afraid. Every time a toddler passed her on the subway, she froze. Every time a teenage boy laughed in the park, her heart would flinch. He would be 4 now, she'd whisper on his birthday. Then 5. Then 6. But even her memories began to blur, his cries, the feel of his hand. She began to doubt herself. Maybe the world was right. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe trauma rewrote her brain. But deep inside, like a buried ember, a mother's knowing still burned. She had held that child. She had kissed his forehead. He was real. And one day, somehow she whispered to the flickering street lamps and sleepless nights, somehow he will remember me. Somehow, he will find me. Every second counts. Like if it hit.
Comment if you cooked the clue?
Subscribe if you're ready for more. The years didn't pass for Layla. They crawled, dragging behind them the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. After the incident, she was placed under observation, then in a women's shelter, then in a temporary mental health care unit where her trauma was documented, medicated, and neatly stored in institutional folders. She aged before her time, her skin thinning like rice paper, eyes dimming like street lamps in fog. She never held another baby. She never even held herself together. Every year on the baby's birthday, July 3rd, she lit a candle on a thrifted cupcake and left it on a park bench, whispering, "If you're out there, I never meant to let go." The city moved on, as it always does, but Layla stayed rooted in a purgatory of memory. She rented basement rooms, wore quiet colors, kept a folded hospital photo of her infant in every coat pocket. She worked when she could, waitressing, then cleaning, then nothing. Her kidneys failed her at 34, and dialysis became her clock. 3 times a week, she'd drag her aching body to the clinic 2 miles away, refusing help, refusing to die until she knew. That's what her body had become, a waiting room. A stubborn, unkempt vessel sitting still while time passed. And then 20 years after that rainy night, on a windless Tuesday in late April, it happened. She missed the clinic shuttle. Again. Her walking cane cracked, and she collapsed near 141st and 5th, clutching her side in pain. That day, an independent cab, not a yellow one, but a muted navy sedan with a taxi sticker, pulled over. The driver, a lean black man in his early 20s with coiled short hair, leaned out and shouted, "You okay?"
Ni d'aride.
Layla, coughing, nodded without speaking. When he stepped out to help her in, her eyes landed on the back seat. It was faint, but there it was. A worn patch of fabric where a child's seat had once been strapped. Her heart hiccuped, then froze. Inside the cab, she trembled. The driver's smile was patient, warm, familiar, but she couldn't place why. His hands, when they touched her elbow, felt too precise, too gentle, like muscle memory guiding him. "Clinic on Grant, right?" he asked. She hadn't told him.
Her voice craqued. How?
He paused, then smiled sadly, shifting into gear. "You dropped something in here, a long time ago." Her breath caught. The engine hummed, and the cab moved. Her vision blurred not from illness, but disbelief. She leaned forward to look at the license displayed on the dashboard. There was a laminated photo of the driver.
Bénéatite, Malik Devrault.
She stared at the name like it was burning. The world turned sideways. She whispered, What's your mother's name?" He answered, almost without thinking, "I don't know. I was adopted when I was a baby." Silence sat between them like a third passenger. Layla's fingers clutched the faded hospital photo in her pocket, thumb pressing over a decades-old crease across the baby's face. "I think," she said, the words nearly swallowing her, "I might be yours." He turned to look at her at the red light, really look. And she saw it. The nose, the eyes, even the way he tilted his head. Her son. Her baby. A man now. The cab behind them honked. The light turned green. But the world stopped for them. Layla didn't speak as the cab turned right onto Grant Avenue, her fingers still wrapped tightly around the crumpled photo in her coat pocket, like it was a relic that could vanish if she let go. Her chest felt hollow, yet her mind raced with memories she'd spent years burying under guilt and grief. She watched Malik in the mirror, his hand steady on the wheel, the quiet hum of the engine the only sound between them. She studied him, the curve of his nose, the faint scar above his left brow, the way he bit the inside of his cheek when waiting at a light. Every small feature pulled at something primal inside her, something maternal she had no right to claim. She hadn't earned the title of mother. Not after what she did. 20 years ago, she'd climbed into a cab just like this one, her infant son wrapped in a thin yellow blanket, no name, no family, no plan. She hadn't known where she was going, only that she couldn't keep him. Drugs still fogged her brain then, her wrists bruised from withdrawal. Her body was a mess, but her soul had been worse. She remembered holding him, the tiny warmth of his body against her chest, how he stopped crying when she sang. She remembered telling herself she'd come back, that she just needed a few days to get clean, find a shelter, figure things out. But she never made it. The overdose happened 3 blocks away. The hospital, the psych ward, the years lost in recovery, they built a wall of time she couldn't break through. And now, that wall had somehow driven her to the front seat of her past. "You okay back there?" Malik asked, voice soft, warm, like a hand extended through storm. Layla cleared her throat, but said nothing. Her eyes had already answered. Sorry if I scared you earlier, he added. I don't usually guess people's destinations like that. Just, you looked familiar. Layla's heart thundered in her ears. She wanted to scream, you should look familiar. You came from me. But instead, she whispered, I used to live near Grant Street. Long time ago. Malik nodded. Yeah? Me too. I mean, I don't remember it. Just stories my mom told me. He smiled, eyes still on the road, unaware of the emotional grenade ticking in the back seat. Layla's throat tightened. Your mom, your birth mom? Malik shook his head. No. I was adopted. I don't know much about my birth mom. Just that she left me in a cab. I guess they tried to find her, but, he trailed off, shrugging like it was just another unchangeable fact of life. But to Layla, it was a dagger through the ribs. She wanted to crawl into the seat beside him, hold his face, tell him she was sorry, for every birthday missed, for every scar he had to carry alone. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she said, do you ever wonder who she was? Malik laughed lightly. All the time. When I was a kid, I used to make up stories. She was a spy, a singer, an astronaut. Sometimes I hated her. Sometimes I thought she must have died saving a child from a fire or something. He grinned again, but the edges of his smile were tinged with quiet sadness. Now? I don't know. I'm just glad my mom raised me right. Layla turned to the window, hiding the tears trailing down her cheeks. The streetlights smeared like melting stars. She pressed the photo tighter into her palm. What if she's still out there? She asked softly. What if she regrets it every single day? Malik blinked at the rearview mirror, then looked forward again. Maybe she does, he said. But what's done is done, right? Layla didn't respond. The cab pulled into the clinic parking lot. A nurse was waiting at the door with a clipboard. As Malik helped Layla out of the back seat, she felt her legs wobble, not just from illness, but from the weight of the moment. He gripped her elbow gently, the same way a son might help his aging mother. Thank you, she said, her voice shaking. You don't know what this ride meant to me. Malik looked puzzled, but smiled anyway. Just doing my job, he said, nodding. Layla hesitated. Can I request you again? He grinned. Sure. Just tell dispatch to send cab 042. I usually run mornings. Layla nodded, stepping inside the clinic, but turned once more before the doors shut behind her. She watched as Malik walked back to his cab, hands in his pockets, head slightly tilted to the sky. And in that moment, as the wind lifted her scarf and the hospital doors closed, she knew she had a chance, not at forgiveness, but at something almost as sacred, truth. If one line hit you hard, imagine what's next. Like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe so you never miss a heartbeat. The moment the wheels of the taxi came to a soft stop outside the dialysis clinic, something fragile inside Layla splintered. Not in pain, but in memory. She turned to thank the driver, her words thick and barely audible, but her eyes stayed locked on his face a beat longer than they should have. Something in Malik's expression, the shape of his nose, the subtle curve of his cheek, the scar just above his left brow, it all flooded her like a dam breaking. She had held her baby for just 5 hours before the fear swallowed her whole. She remembered it vividly now. The night was cold, wet, and she was shaking in a cab with blood still on her jeans. She remembered looking down at the tiny sleeping boy wrapped in a hospital blanket, a piece of her heart she didn't know how to keep. She had handed him to the driver with trembling hands, whispered, "Please take him somewhere safe," then vanished into the alley before the driver even looked back. She hadn't slept properly since. And now the same face, or perhaps the echo of it, had driven her gently to her appointment, his voice calm, his hand steady, his kindness piercing. She spent the next hour in a reclined chair at the clinic, the machine humming beside her, eyes fixed on the rain-slicked window, the sound of Malik's voice haunting her ears. After her treatment, as she shuffled back toward the cab, the nurse offered her an umbrella, but Layla waved it away. She wanted to feel the rain. Malik stood holding the taxi door open, his eyes kind but reserved. He asked, "Do you need anything else today?" She hesitated. Her tongue curled behind her teeth like it was choking on words. "Can we just drive?" she finally said. "No destination. Just movement." Malik frowned slightly but nodded. "Meters off," he said, and helped her in. They drove. Through the old neighborhoods, past the corner store that used to sell penny candy, past the community center that was once a church, past a narrow alley where a younger Layla had once pressed her back against the brick, covering her face and trying not to scream. She asked questions, softly, like a stranger trying not to intrude. "Do you have family?" "Foster mostly," Malik answered. "I aged out of the system at 18. Layla felt her throat tighten. "Ever try to find your mother?" There was a pause. "I did," he said. "Once. All I had was a blanket and the word Layla stitched into it." The name dropped between them like a stone in water. Layla stared ahead, heart thundering. "What would you say to her?" she asked. Malik didn't look at her. "I don't know. I'd want to ask why. But I'm scared of the answer." Layla whispered, "Maybe she thought she was doing the right thing. Maybe she loved you too much to let you suffer with her." Malik was quiet for a long moment. "Then she was wrong," he said. "Because I still suffered. Just without her." Layla turned her face to the window so he wouldn't see her tears. The car turned onto Mercer Street. Her old street. Her voice trembled. "Can we stop here?" She climbed out slowly, her legs weak. The house she used to live in was now a cracked shell, boarded windows, a for sale sign swinging crooked. She stared at it like a ghost staring at its own grave. Malik got out too, standing beside her, confused. "Did you live here?" he asked. Layla nodded. "A long time ago." She pulled the crumpled photo from her coat pocket and handed it to him. In it, a young woman in a hospital bed holding a newborn baby, looking exhausted, terrified, and fiercely in love. "That's you," she said, her voice breaking. "And me."
Malik froze.
His eyes darted between the photo and her face. "What are you saying?"
She stepped closer. "I'm your mother."
The silence that followed was the loudest sound Layla had ever known.
If one line hit you hard, imagine what is next.
Like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe so you never miss a heartbeat. Malik didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. The photo trembled between his fingers as the rain ran down his sleeves, soaking through the cuff of his hoodie. The image was old, wrinkled, stained at the edges, but unmistakable.
A hospital bed.
A newborn swaddled in white. A younger version of Layla, her cheeks rounder, her eyes brighter, smiling weakly as she held him close. He stared at it, hoping it was some cruel joke, a coincidence, a trick of light or memory. But the scar above the baby's eyebrow, the one he still carried, was there, faint but visible. Layla said nothing more. She just stood there under the growing rain, shrinking in her coat like a child being scolded. "You," Malik finally whispered, the words catching in his throat.
"You're my mother."
Layla nodded slowly, like even she couldn't believe she was saying it aloud. "Yes. I am. I was."
He don't know anymore.
Malik backed away, the photo now limp in his hand.
"You left me."
In a taxi. His voice wasn't angry, not yet, just stunned, hollowed out by disbelief. "I was 17, she said, voice cracking. "I had no home. No family. The driver was kind. I thought if I left you in his cab, he'd take you somewhere safer than I ever could. I stayed behind the building all night, watching from the alley, praying someone would find you and love you better than I could." Malik's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around the edges of the photo. "That's not how mothers work." Her breath caught. I know that now." She coughed into her sleeve, blood speckling the fabric. Malik took a half step forward instinctively, then froze. A war raged silently in his chest, rage, grief, longing, abandonment, and confusion folding over one another like waves in a storm. "You knew who I was when you saw me?" he asked finally, eyes piercing.
"No," she said softly.
"Not at first. But your voice, it sounded like mine when I was your age. And your face, the scar, I couldn't stop staring. Then I saw your bracelet." He looked down. On his wrist was the cheap leather band he'd worn since childhood, something the social worker said came with him. It had a single metal bead sewn into the leather. She whispered, "I made that. The day before you were born. I traded my earrings for it." Malik yanked it off as if it burned him. "Why now?" he asked.
Why come back?
She looked down at the bracelet in his hand. Because dying makes you brave in ways living never could. They stood in silence outside the crumbling house, the one where Layla had once given birth with only a broken radiator and a borrowed radio for comfort. She began to speak, slowly at first, unraveling the story she had buried for 2 decades. She told him about the hunger, the clinic that turned her away because she had no ID, the weeks of living in shelters and under bus stops, the one night she thought about ending it all but couldn't because of the tiny flutter in her belly. She had fought truly. But in the final hour when all hope vanished, she chose to leave him where he might be found. It was cowardice, she admitted, voice thin. But I told myself it was mercy.
Malik said nothing.
His silence was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was not rejection either. He simply turned and walked toward the taxi. Layla followed, slowly, clutching her side. They drove in silence for a long time. No destination. Just the hum of tires and the rhythmic breathing of 2 strangers tethered by blood and pain. Finally, he pulled over near a city park, half forgotten by time. The rain had stopped. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the swings. I don't know what you want from me, Malik said, eyes fixed on the steering wheel. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said. I just needed you to know I never forgot you. Not once. Not for a single day. And I'm so sorry. More than I'll ever be able to show. Her hands trembled in her lap. I spent 24 years carrying your absence like a second spine. It broke me. Every time I saw a boy with his mother. Every time someone asked if I had kids. I had to lie. Malik swallowed hard. They told me I was found in a taxi. That no one ever claimed me. She nodded. I used to call hospitals every year on your birthday. Just to check. I gave them a name they never wrote down. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, faint rays lit the dashboard. Layla reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a pacifier clip, the same leather band, only this one had 2 beads, one with the letter M and one with L. It was supposed to say Malik and Layla. But I only had enough beads for initials. She set it gently between them. Malik stared at it, the muscles in his jaw twitching. Then slowly, he reached out and picked it up, running his thumb over the metal. He didn't speak, but he didn't hand it back either. Layla leaned back in the seat, a quiet breath escaping her lips. Not relief, but the exhale of someone who's carried a story too long and finally released it into the air. So what now? Malik finally asked. She smiled faintly. Now, nothing. Or something. Whatever you can give. Even silence. Even goodbye. But when he pulled up to her building later that day, Malik didn't drive off immediately. He waited, engine humming, as she stepped out slowly, pausing at the curb. She looked back once, as if to memorize his face all over again. And then, unexpectedly, he leaned across the seat and called out, "Same time tomorrow?" Her eyes welled. She nodded. "If you're sure." He didn't answer. Just tapped the wheel once and drove away, leaving the space between them open, not healed, not whole, but no longer empty. Like what you just saw. Or didn't see. Hit like, comment what you think really happened, and subscribe before it disappears. Rafiq didn't ask for explanations that night. He drove in silence for a while, tears shimmering in his eyes, hands trembling on the wheel as he navigated through familiar streets that now felt haunted with new meaning. Lena sat in the back, her dialysis bag resting on her lap, but her hands gripped the worn seat edge like a lifeline. The hum of the engine was the only sound between them. But it wasn't empty silence. It was the kind of silence where hearts spoke the words lips never could. When Rafiq finally spoke, it was not with accusation, but with the weight of a man who had carried an unanswered question for 20 years. "Why?" he asked, his voice quiet, cracked, not angry, just needing to know. And Lena, eyes rimmed red, mouth trembling, whispered the truth she had buried so deep even she had stopped believing it mattered. "I was 17. My mother had just died. I had no one. No money. No home. No help. I had you drive me from the hospital, and when you looked at me in that rearview mirror,
I saw something safe. Something kind.
I thought you'd save her better than I could." Her voice broke. "I didn't even leave a note. I thought I'd come back for her after a few weeks, but then, I got sick.
Life got worse.
I ended up in shelters, rehab, on the streets. And by the time I could think clearly, I convinced myself you'd already given her a better life than I could ever offer. She paused. Did she hate me? Rafik pulled the taxi to the side of the road, turned off the ignition, and turned fully to face her. She didn't know, he said softly. She thought you died. We told her your name was Anaya. That you passed when she was a baby. It was selfish, maybe wrong, but we didn't want her to think she was abandoned. She grew up loved. She got scholarships. She writes books now, children's stories. She always said she felt things deeply. I think she got that from you. Lena let out a sob, part relief, part grief, and leaned forward. Does she know about me now? Rafik nodded slowly. Not yet. But she deserves to. And you deserve to meet her. If you want. And for the first time in 2 decades, Lena allowed herself to nod too. The next week was a blur of small, quiet steps. Long calls between Rafik and his daughter Maya. Deeper conversations between Lena and Rafik, where wounds bled openly and the air finally allowed healing. When Maya agreed to meet, Lena couldn't stop shaking. They met at the park where Maya used to read her stories aloud as a kid. Lena wore the only decent dress she owned, a faded blue cotton one Rafik had helped iron. Her scarf was neatly pinned, hands trembling, breath uneven. Maya arrived, 21 now, soft brown skin like her mother's, long curls tied in a braid, glasses perched on a nose identical to Lena's. She walked slowly, cautiously. And Lena broke. She covered her mouth and cried, her knees buckling before Maya rushed to her. There were no dramatic declarations, no mom. Just a long trembling embrace as Maya held her birth mother like someone she had always missed without knowing why. I always felt there was something more, she whispered into Lena's hair. I always had dreams about someone watching me from the back of a taxi. Lena sobbed harder. It wasn't perfect after that. There were awkward lunches, tears, guilt, confusion. But there was also laughter, healing, and a quiet confusion. But there was also laughter, healing, and a quiet rebuilding. Lena began writing too, about survival, regret, and second chances. And Maya? She published a new book 2 years later called The Girl in the Back Seat, dedicated to the ones who return when they no longer have to. Rafik kept driving his taxi, though now less frequently. He drove Lena to her checkups, and Maya sometimes rode with them, the 3 of them chatting about everything and nothing. And every time they passed the street where it all began, Lena would quietly reach forward and place her hand on Rafik's shoulder. No words. Just a silent thank you, for being the stranger who became a lifeline. In the end, this wasn't a story about abandonment. It was about a circle that closed after 2 decades, slowly, painfully, but fully.